So after playing a bit of this game in its initial early access, as I recalled it from a long time ago that's an ambitious sandbox extraction FPS, I think it leans somewhere between proof of concept and alpha. Either way, it's far too early to tell and more of a bid to see how the feedback and money generated by this can be used to funnel back entirely into the game to improve at an expedited pace, by the developer's own words in his early access launch video. In basically 4 or so years of mostly solo development work, this is what is here as a realized starting point after much time investment to get things in a proper pace for it to finally evolve. So unfortunately, because it's early access, and the nature of early access being, well, incomplete, it's rather bare bones in a lot of areas that basically has a really jank feel, and a lack of a convincing gameplay loop. It's mostly up to RNG if you can climb out of the early game to get something rolling. If I think of the idea of the game's pillars of gameplay, it would obviously be the combat, level design and traversal, and economy. But you can't really have all of that if it's at a point in which all of that is subject to change. Basically, it boils down to, do you believe in the developer's vision? To make good on promises, in that the product becomes transformed in a way that will hopefully change itself by the goodwill of the community and its funding. An all too common tale in early access games, honestly. It's a big ask given that not many games can make good on the ambitions promised overall, and especially in the early access market. This game and S.T.A.L.K.E.R are my highest hopes that they can break past their initial trappings to make something truly unique, and hopefully the developers' careful considerations and planning prior to production will make that a reality at some point. I firmly believe that this will get somewhere, however, given the developer's transparency and willing to communicate what he's doing and how he's doing it. By the way, I am adamantly stating that you absolutely should think twice before supporting early access projects, but if you like these sorts of extraction or hardcore FPS games, this one would be the one to support. This is one of the most early access type games I've seen with features that look nearly complete being side by side with ones that aren't. And yet at the same time, if it does take off, I do think it could be a special something. But with all things of this sort, I think a healthy amount of skepticism is warranted. For a game that has its development plans and workflow worked out quite in advance, this game is missing basic features and quality of life things that you'd expect from games of the genre, such as a general lack of loot from enemies, a take all button, or even hotkeys for items. But that's kind of a given to some extent, as individual quirks in approaching something so large an undertaking will make these things more apparent. But as a base, it is really quite promising minus the enemy AI. I don't think I've seen a sandbox FPS game made in Godot to this sort of fidelity that also runs really well, as well. Most games made with it are like S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 and Brotato mainly. Awesome games, but overall are not made for realistic visual fidelity, or similar to what already works for the indie scene. But what Road to Vostok currently is missing at this period is any form of reason to go towards the danger. To Vostok itself, as well, there currently really isn't a reason to do so. Early access here is semi-functional but not really interesting. It's really just a small-scale sandbox to mess around in. But that's the point, right? With everything I'm saying is the idea that the developer will realize a good game with a huge asterisk of, it's coming later. But to be fair, as someone who's tried the game for the first time, it's surprisingly good, while knowing that what's here is not much. The gameplay is really compelling when it works. I like it more as a gut instinct compared to trying titles like Incursion Red River or Ready or Not if we're talking about a balance point between realism, gameplay, and the intended effect that it's striving towards. The thing that confuses me the most, however, is the roadmap, as even Build 2 seems like an extremely large uplift in terms of scope and complexity, a friendly faction, AI vs AI combat, and presumably emergent events, AI variants, which I presume to mean different sorts of behavior models, a new map, and trader. If you look further down, however, you'll see seriously drastic new stuff like defense shelters, dynamic weather, hunting and wildlife, dialogue systems, a sea system, quest lines, world generation options, and a destruction system, and so much more. That's a lot. More than what full-fledged AAA companies would even possibly try to do with copious amounts of money. Yet at the same time, something not possible by the industry, as I don't think anyone but indie developers would try risking to go all in with one game. But I gotta ask, is that even possible? All the roadmap build releases beyond Build 3 don't have any sort of expected date and look way more complex as it goes on, particularly starting at Build 5, so pardon me if I feel like it simply feels like content creep to promise a larger scope of empty features. Even if a developer could add all that, does that mean it's good enough, especially for the realism context that's going for? How and what sorts of compromises will there be? These are the sorts of things that people have been excited about for this game for a very long time since its initial announcement. So I decided to watch most of the development log videos that the developer put out on their YouTube channel after trying out the early access. And the developer is pretty good at describing the nuance that he wants to fill the game with, and worth it alone if you want to understand game development workflows. But what new features described there in his newer videos aren't here yet in any major capacity, or even on the roadmap. He has reworked the game from Unity to the Godot engine in 2024, however, a serious undertaking that no doubt slowed progress. But there seems to be a pause in putting any meaningful content than what is already here. Something novel or new to the experience hasn't been shown off, interestingly. No doubt the developer is self-aware of this, but at the same time, I think refining the base and the general core pillars of the game should be the utmost priority instead of builds 2 and 3. If it somehow does work out, well, I'll be ecstatic, but I'm having a hard time thinking that will happen. I think what needs addressing foremost is the complexity of the AI, or lack thereof. In all the PvE extraction games or hardcore FPS games I played, the most common and assured complaint is that the AI are not great to fight against. They are aimbots to defeat on a very short ticking timer that doesn't have an elegant solution. Damage taken sometimes feels like RNG based on various factors that often aren't realistic or reasonably avoidable, or is the product of parameters leading to strange scenarios. If you want to show nuance and impressive work, I think selling or promoting the most compelling gameplay elements is the best way to show off why someone should be interested in supporting it. For many people interested in these sorts of games, if they can tell the AI in this game is flat or doesn't allow for compelling gameplay, they likely won't try it, as it really doesn't matter how good the rest of the game is or will be. This is especially apparent for the core fanbase, which is from the S.T.A.L.K.E.R, DayZ, or Tarkov communities. Bad AI completely takes the player right out of the experience, especially for games aiming for realism. If you want to play a game that demonstrates what really good AI can look like, I would recommend Sulaco if you enjoy Fear-style AI gameplay in a boomer shooter framework, though that works as specifically tailored to its Doom-style level design. But I think this absolutely should be the utmost priority of this game. Everything is second to how the player directly challenges what is there. At the moment, AI feel incredibly basic, but will absolutely laser you in close distance engagements. You will hardly catch them first, as the only real way you really know that they're there is when you hear the crack of bullets, which isn't great when healing items are difficult to acquire in early game. So far, the changes of early access as noted by the changelog seem to add or modify what exists, but doesn't necessarily improve the experience. You can't improve the experience so much, in my opinion, if you don't improve the core features, as that's the whole point of sandbox games. Emergent gameplay through how well knit or tightly designed its mechanics can scale across whatever parameters or features present. From what I can tell, what is here is made the way it is so future content can be dropped into the game as frictionlessly as possible by the developer's lengthy pre-production efforts of refining what and how the scope of the game can be over the long period that he's been working on it. You got stuff like vehicles, random events, and other things like that are coming to the future apparently. It's neat that these are being worked on, but I'd rather more pressing issues be squashed first. Regardless, if the developer acknowledges that the AI is an issue, what sorts of things did he try to tackle the problem? Well, I've seen the devlog, which he answers in 2022, and the game used a system of color differential between the object and the player that was scrapped, and later in 2024 and 2025 introduces the AI mixer system and its improvements. It reminds me of Ready or Not system that has AI behavior based on various parameters that are randomized and react to the scenarios by outputting an action that seems contextually appropriate. But in Ready or Not is dictated both on what is happening and what surrounding allies or foes are doing, rather than what largely seems to be the player state and simplistic things like health values and whatnot here. It's also kind of a mess in Ready or Not, so yeah, understandable that the various reworks and effort required for something like this takes a lot of time. I'm hoping that this AI mixer system becomes more nuanced, as AI clearly have visible seams in their animations based on their selected action state that demonstrates that drone-like behavior that other reviews commonly note. Most importantly, they're kinda non-functional in many ways. You can simply just make distance from them in my experience, as they are entirely lacking in dynamics if you stay far enough away. So the AI only really works at the moment if you're close enough for the contextual actions to occur. Otherwise, you'll be straining to see the 10 pixels firing at you. I want to see how the developer addresses larger scale issues like that given the rudimentary systems in place currently for AI logic, spawns, and so on. More action states and animation and tension would be great too, as well. There's only up to 10 AI per map if it's to be believed from the tutorial whenever you enter a new area. Since it's so small scale, I would love to see a general AI state similar to Ready or Not's adrenaline fight or flight behavior for AI activity based on gunfire or allied behaviors, or even skill levels as AI at the moment feel like the same thing across various difficulty areas. People note that AI can be contextualized through firing behavior like mag dumping on contact for less skilled enemies, to accurate burst fires for more trained units, and better or worse acquisition timing based on the idea of how experienced the enemies are given their roles. Bandits definitely shouldn't be anywhere as good as grizzled veterans meant to keep people out. I'd also like more contextual actions for AI as well, given that they're likely to hear all the gunfire in the air, perhaps for an extended amount of time, and think, oh wow, someone's going ham over there and I should join in too, or even surrender or exit the map if someone next to them gets immediately dropped. It will make suppressors more interesting as well, given that the AI always knows where you are before you do, that renders them largely functionless. Essentially, there should be a lot more going on with how the AI reacts, or appears to react with what is happening directly in the sandbox environment. But that's the thing, right? If you're developing systems that don't exist or aren't implemented yet, how do you add that nuance later that affirms other parts of the game? I don't doubt the developer's skills and mindset, but if you put things in like a questline and dialogue system, I'm curious on how that's going to be handled given that the work he has done so far isn't anywhere the same as making a good story, or how vehicles operate, and so on with so many of these features. I'm sure some of this has to do with the contractual work system he has established to improve development, but who knows? This game is attempting to be realistic, but a lot of it simply makes little to no sense at the moment. So I'm curious how the game develops with someone so knowledgeable and passionate about what they're making. If there was any game that could reach its ambitions and is actually worth the money, I think it would be this one, as nothing like this exists in the market currently to the extent in which the developer envisions it. It's not here yet, and probably won't be for a long time, but has something compelling to it that makes it worth believing in. I don't think it's really worth playing right now, but you might want to check back in the future. I want to stress again that it's not advisable to throw money at something that may or may not be what it claims to be, but if you really want something like this to come to fruition, I think this is the one to give it to, as the developer claims it will actually allow him to expedite the process of development. Thanks for watching, and I hope you will subscribe.